Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This podcast is brought to you by hituni.com. That's hituni.com. HitUni is an e-learning course provider specializing in high-intensity training for personal trainers and for people looking to learn how to apply the principles of HIT to their own training for best results. It comes highly recommended by Body by Science author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, MedX Precision Fitness owner Blair Wilson, HIT expert Drew Bay, and the founder of Living La Vida Low Carb, Jimmy Moore. It was founded by author and high-intensity training master personal trainer Simon Shawcross. Simon has 15 years experience and has supervised over 15,000 workouts. Due to a combination of demand and a lack of quality in certification programs in the fields of high-intensity training, Simon and his team spent the last 3 years developing top-quality courses that will educate fitness professionals and participants to enable them to train individuals and themselves in the safest manner and produce best results. HIT Uni has been put together using knowledge from the very best minds in the field of exercise, including Skylar Tanner, James Steele, Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, John Little, Mike Mensa, Arthur Jones, Dr. Ellington Darden, and many more. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace and convenience. The online video presentations are engaging and make learning fun. Online support and a discussion forum are provided to resolve any sticking points and enable you to share ideas and ask for help. Depending on whether you want to become a personal trainer, are already a personal trainer who wants to upskill, or if you're a keen HIT participant that is eager to learn more about how you can apply HIT to your own workouts for maximum benefit, there are several great value courses to choose from. I am personally partway through the PT course and I'm really enjoying it. I primarily wanted to do the course to learn more about how to apply HIT to my own training for better results. The courses are really easy to follow and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's hituni.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, hituni.com, pick your course and enter the coupon code CW10. Thanks very much for your support. Hi guys, this is Lawrence Neal and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior, where it is my job to interview world-class experts on exercise, health, performance and productivity to identify the workouts, routines, habits, diets, philosophies, books and resources that you can use to significantly improve your effectiveness and efficiency in your everyday life. Guests include exercise scientists, highly successful fitness CEOs, world-class experts in biomechanics, nomadic entrepreneurs, New York Times bestsellers, elite adventure racers, and many more. Today's guest is the author of The Slow Burn Fitness Revolution and the founder of Serious Strength, Fred Hahn. A few highlights about Fred, for those of you that don't know. Fred's been involved in exercise since the age of 10, and he began training clients in the early 1980s. So Fred has a ton of experience training himself and others. In 1998, he founded Serious Strength, which became a very successful fitness business, which has 2 locations in New York and New Jersey. And Serious Strength train everyone from mums, dads, kids to CEOs, celebrities, and best-selling authors. And I just found out that Serious Strength was endorsed by personal development superstar Tony Robbins, which I didn't notice before when I actually interviewed Fred. And I think that's probably the best endorsement you could possibly have on your website. So that's pretty impressive. Fred authored The Slow Burn Fitness Revolution with New York Times bestselling authors Drs. Mary and Michael Dan Eads, who are the authors behind Protein Power, which is a very, very popular New York Times bestseller. Slow Burn Fitness Revolution is one of the best-selling fitness books in Random House history. Fred's very successful career has been followed by some of the biggest media giants on the planet. So Fred's appeared on NBC's The Today Show, CNN's The Biz, WABC's Morning Show, NBC's Live at 5, Fox 5 News, ABC's Eyewitness News, and more. And he's been interviewed by the New York Times and the Washington Post. So Fred's a bit of a big celebrity, I guess, in the high-intensity strength training space. And a lot of you wanted me to get Fred on the podcast. And it was a really, really fun conversation. We get into all sorts of cool stuff in this one. So just to give you a few highlights, we talk a lot about Fred's exercise regime and his high-fat, low-carb diet, which is obviously growing in popularity. And I answer some of the questions that you submitted. So things like how to keep children motivated to exercise, and also how to break past some of those mental barriers that stop some of us from reaching muscular failure. And then we kind of finish up on some great tips on how to build a successful fitness business. And then I fire a load of rapid fire questions at Fred as well. All of the show notes and links will be in the usual place on corpwarrior.com, CORP warrior, WARRIOR.com, which will redirect you to 15minutescorporatewarrior.com. So without further ado, please enjoy this interview with Fred Hahn. Okay, so Fred, just to kick off with, could you tell me the story about your life before high-intensity training, how you came to know about high-intensity strength training, and then obviously building a business around it? But could you kind of walk us through that journey?
Yeah, well, that's a heck of a journey, I'll tell you that. Well, I mean, it all kind of started, I guess, when I was about 10 years old, and I had a buddy of mine named Danny Dre, and we were walking through the park. I was in 6th grade, and it was like a summer day, and I don't know, I just never noticed it, but there were these 2 policemen that were always around in the area, and I guess Danny knew them, they were friends, or I can't remember, maybe one of them was his uncle, I just don't remember. But the one cop said, "Hey, Danny, let's see that muscle." And my friend Danny flexes his biceps, and it was unbelievable. Like I couldn't believe what I was like. As kids, no one's looking at anybody's biceps. You're just like having fun. So I said to him, I'm like, "Danny, how in the world did you get a muscle like that?" He goes, "My dad bought me some weights in my basement, and I just lift weights in my basement." And I said, "You got to show me." So went over his house one day, went down to the basement, and he had these, the old plastic weeder plates, and he just said, "Yeah, this is how you do biceps curls. This is how you do bench press." He had an old Ricky bench, and so anyway, I started, and I was a very naturally skinny, like incredibly skinny kid. So I started doing it. I got my dad to buy me a set of barbells, and then of course I did the obligatory buy the Charles Atlas stuff and buy the Joe Weider, max muscle plan or whatever the heck he called it then, and just started lifting, and I got stronger, and I kind of liked the way it felt, and so that's kind of how it started, really. And then in high school, I wrestled for 1 season, and was introduced to Nautilus training. And there was this is in Montclair. I went to Montclair High School, and in the neighboring town of Verona, there was a place called Powerflex Nautilus, and it was a new back then. So this is 1977, 78, something like that, when Nautilus was sort of at its height. And joined up and was pulverized. I could not believe how difficult. In fact, it was so difficult, I was afraid to go back. So anyway, I comparatively to my free weight training, and I was doing the typical 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets of biceps curls, benches, deadlifts. I was doing all the conventional stuff. And the difference between how I felt after like 20 minutes of Nautilus and an hour using my free weights the Arnold Schwarzenegger way was night and day. Wow. So I was instantly convinced that this was a superior way to train. The problem with it was that it was so difficult. Like I said, it was like I didn't want to go. So I kind of went back and forth with how I wanted to train. So I would go back and do conventional training with free weights, multiple sets, squats, deadlifts, all that stuff. And but it never gave me the same benefit that the Nautilus training did. So
when you say benefit, do you mean the same post-workout feel? Is that what you're referring to, or the muscular growth that you're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, and I was naturally skinny, like an ectomorphish I have an ectomorphish kind of body. I have narrow shoulders. I have very small wrists, small ankles. I'm not a big guy. I mean, I'm 5'10", but I'm not built like a mesomorph. So I don't build muscle easily, but looking at my legs and looking at my arms and, just look in the mirror and and you look at yourself, and I just could not achieve with conventional free weight multiple set volume training. I could not achieve what I was able to do with the Nautilus training, but the Nautilus training was just brutal. So I would go back and forth with it. And then what happened after that? So then I went to college, went here, went there, and trained, multiple different ways. And then I started to learn about Ellington Darden's books. And I started using those principles, which are Nautilus principles, but not as brutal as getting trained by a Nautilus trainer in the Nautilus facility. So I found that I could train less intensely, still intensely, but I didn't have to vomit to get the same benefit. So that made me happy. So then I was a martial artist for many years. I started Goju-Ryu karate when I was 15. And then I continued to study karate up until I was about 35, 36 years old. Different types of Goju-Ryu and Shorin-Ryu and Seido, which is a type of Kyokushinkai karate. So I would continue with my weight training. I continued with my weight training all the while I was doing martial arts as well. So, but when you go around, you're in college, you don't have access to great equipment. So most of my training, most of the time, was with free weights and conventional type of stuff. So, and then in 1993 or so, I got hired as the strength trainer for the Hospital for Joint Diseases Sports Medicine Center in New York City. They had opened up a brand new sports medicine facility. So I got hired. I was dating one of the physical therapists at the time, and I got hired as the strength trainer. So in other words, you'd go skiing, you'd hurt your knee, the doctor would fix your knee, and then you'd go to physical therapy. Physical therapist would do whatever the physical therapist would do with you, and then they'd throw you to me and say, and the PT would say, all right, Fred, strengthen his quads. All right, Fred, strengthen his hamstrings, or whatever it is they wanted me to do. So I was in charge of all of the strength training for the Hospital for Joint Disease Sports Medicine Center from like 1990. When was the Gulf War? Like 1990, 91, so just after that. So like 91 to 93, something around there. So I felt that it was my responsibility, obviously, to find not only the most effective way to strengthen these patients, but also, obviously, the safest way. And because a lot of patients only have 6 to 8 weeks worth of insurance-paid rehabilitation, I have to try to find the most efficient way too. So it was my responsibility to do some reading. So I did a lot of reading on all different types of strength training. I had a lot of experience on my own. And little by little, I found that, number one, training people using a very slow and controlled concentric and eccentric almost always made it so that they could exercise through a full range of motion pain-free. So whenever you saw conventional, like leg extensions, leg presses, they were moving kind of fast. Mm-hmm. It would be more forceful, obviously, right? And so by slowing them down, it seemed to work a lot better, and it was far less uncomfortable for them. And it seemed to get them, I was able to use heavier weights than they would normally use if they were moving quickly. So I think the combination of the slow speed plus the heavier weights allowed them to get much better results much faster. So much so that one day, the head of orthopedic surgery is looking through the window, and he's looking at me, and I'm training somebody, I don't know, I think I was on a hamstring curl with somebody, and he points to me, and he says, like, he curls his finger to say, come here. And I went out there, and he says, I want you to come to my office. And I thought I was getting fired. So he sits down and goes, what are you doing with my patients? And I said, well, my job, I'm trying to make them stronger. And he goes, I just want to say one thing. I have never seen my patients get this strong this fast. What are you doing? And so I explained to him what I was doing. And then he hired me as his own personal trainer to come to his home and train him in this system that I was using. So, which I hadn't named yet. And there were names for it. Some people called it super slow. Some people called it, like Dr. Ben Bakikio, he now calls it the SMART exercise system. Way back in the 40s and 50s, it was called MCMM, which stood for muscular contractions with measured movement.
It's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah. So this type of, the concept of training using a very slow and controlled tempo is not new. I didn't invent it. It's been around forever. And in fact, way back when, the old timers who were doing things like strongman stunts, like Zercher lifts and all kinds of different crazy strongman stunts, would use this MCMM technique to get around injuries and to break strength plateaus. And so when I read this, I thought, well, if it helps to break strength plateaus, why not use it all the time? If it's better than what you're using, if it's breaking a plateau, why would you stop using it? So I explained to the doctor that this is what I was doing. I was doing this with the patients. And so I started training him, and he got much, much stronger than he was before. And then one day I'm in the gym, I'm in the PT clinic again, and he points to me through the glass window and says, "Come hither." And he takes me into his office, and he said, "You know what, Fred, I just want to tell you something. I went back to my gym on my own, and I started using weights and techniques that I used before, and I could not believe how much easier it was to lift the weights I was lifting before with a conventional, like lifting in 1 second and lowering it in 1 second or so." So he was convinced. And then from there, I hope I'm not just rambling on here.
No, this is great. This is great, yeah.
He goes, I've always wanted to have my own physical therapy clinic, but doctors can't run their own physical therapy clinic. It's illegal. So I said, well, I've always wanted to have my own personal training studio. So what we did was we created a business called Metro Sports Med. I ran it, and it was housed inside New York Methodist Hospital, which is in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And so what we did was conventional physical therapy, but we included a full body, what I call now slow burn strength training routine. So that, again, let's say you went skiing and you hurt your knee, the doctor fixed your knee. You'd come to our physical therapy clinic. The physical therapist would do heat, ice, electric stimulation, massage, all the stuff that a physical therapist is licensed to do. But then you'd be given to a certified personal trainer, and that trainer would put you through a full body slow burn routine. So we wouldn't just strengthen your knee. We would strengthen your knee, your neck, your lower back, your biceps, your chest, everything we could get our hands on in half the amount of time it takes just to strengthen your knee in conventional physical therapy. So the idea was to see if we could get insurance companies to accept this protocol and pay for this protocol. But as you might guess, insurance companies are not in the wellness business. They're in the business of not paying for anything as much as they possibly can. So a few years went by, and it just didn't seem to catch on, so to speak, because you're dealing with a huge machine. So in any event, long story short, in 1998, I left. In 1997, I left the physical therapy clinic because the doctor decided that this, there's no way to make money on this. He believed in it, but he had to go back to conventional physical therapy stuff because otherwise thing would go out of business. So I opened up and established slow burn personal training on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in 1998, and I've had my facility there now for next June will be 19 years. I can't even believe it.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And I just had my 1-year anniversary party at my new facility in Montclair, New Jersey. So that's kind of like the long story short of how I did all this. I'm sure I left a lot out, but that's kind of like how it happened.
No, that's great. Thank you for going through that. Really interesting, actually. A couple of things you mentioned, which I just want to delve into. You mentioned how you started off, or you say you have an ectomorphic frame, and how you don't gain muscle very easily. I've seen pictures of you on Facebook, and I'm pretty impressed. I thought you were actually coming from more of a mesomorph physique. So what do you attribute to you being able to transform your body like that? Because you seem to have what appears to me is like a mesomorphic physique, and what would you attribute to that? I'm assuming obviously the high intensity training principles, but could you just walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for the compliment. If you read, of course, if you go to my Facebook page and you read the comments there, you can see how how people make fun of me all the time. But funny how that is. But anyway, I think mostly it has to do with nutrition. I adopted, my co-authors on the Slow Burn Fitness Revolution book. My co-authors are Doctors Mike and Mary Dan Eads, who are the New York Times best-selling authors of Protein Power. Mm-hmm. And when I started reading their work, I was so very impressed with what they had to say that I altered my diet from a high carbohydrate, primarily carbohydrate, oatmeal in the morning and toast and whole wheat toast and blah, 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 to a diet that was more like 60 to 70% fat. So after I read, as I mentioned, Dr. Eads' work, I was so very impressed with what he had to say that I altered my diet from a primarily carbohydrate diet. So I was probably eating in the neighborhood of 60% carbohydrate, low in fat, because I truly believe that fat, if you eat fat, clogs your arteries. If you eat fat, it'll make you fat. I bought that philosophy hook, line, and sinker. So then I switched it to primarily fat. So now I was eating more like 60, 70% fat. And I eat more fat than that now, and probably about the same amount of protein. But I kind of flip-flopped the carbohydrate for fat, I guess you could say. And I started to notice a big difference in how I felt. And I think it contributed to, I don't have any scientific evidence to support this, but I think it contributed to growing more muscle tissue and losing more fat. It just seemed to really help body composition a lot. Along with, so that's kind of like part of it. And the other part of it is learning not to exercise 3 to 4 days a week. I found that I like training, so I like the feeling of training. I like the pump, a lot of us do. Mm-hmm. But I found that as I started to decrease my frequency, I began to get better results. So I was usually training my conventional way of training was 3 times a week. And sometimes I'd throw in a fourth just because that's my philosophy on it, my thinking on it had been already sort of established by conventional training. And I thought the more you train, the more sets you do, the more volume you do, the more frequently you do it, the more your body will adapt, the more your body will grow. But that just simply isn't true. It's not necessarily true, I should say. Bodybuilders find ways to train 4 to 5 days a week effectively. So what they do is they find very inefficient and effective ways to train. And very often they don't train very hard. But I found that hard training, intense training, was better than less intense training. And then I found that training less frequently, like once every 3rd day or so, allowed for better growth. And I don't mean all of a sudden I hit 200 pounds, but I was generally in the neighborhood of like 160, let's say, 165. And then I got up to about 185. Now, I also added fat too. So I had to alter how I ate and, quite frankly, how I drank. Too much beer. You think you train hard, you think you can, but you can't. So,
sure.
And then the third thing that happened, so diet, altering my diet away from carbohydrate and more towards more fat, decreasing my frequency of training, keeping the intensity high, but keeping the frequency less. And then the third thing that really made a difference was changing philosophy on repetition speed. And I'll give you an example. One day I was in in the pullover machine, and I decided, let's try going back to the old way of doing things, like lifting 1 or 2 seconds and lowering in 2 to 3 seconds. And I noticed that with the same weight that I was using training slowly, super slow in a sense, like, maybe lifting it in 6, 7 or so and lowering it in 6 or 7 seconds, I reached fatigue sooner. So in other words, if using the same weight, when using the same weight with a faster lifting speed and lowering speed, I reached complete fatigue sooner. So with the slower rep speed, I reached failure in about 80 some odd seconds, 90 seconds or so. Mm-hmm. With the faster repetition speed, with the same weight, I reached failure in about 60 seconds. Right. That interested me. And So I thought to myself, well, if I want to reach 60 seconds to failure using a slow repetition speed, what would I have to do? And it occurred to me I'd have to make the weight heavier. So
what was that? You had to make the weight lighter, did you say, Fred? Sorry, just
I'm sorry?
there. Did you say you had to make the weight lighter? Sorry, I missed that.
I had to make the weight heavier.
Oh, heavier. Apologies. Okay.
So I don't remember exactly what the weight was, but let's say it was 100 pounds. And with a slow repetition tempo, I was reaching failure in 90 seconds or so. With the faster repetition tempo, I was reaching failure in 60 seconds. So I increased the weight to 240 pounds and used the slow repetition speed. It was slow because I couldn't go fast if I wanted to and reach failure in about 50, 60 seconds. In other words, I went away from conventional super slow, which was take the weight you use in the Nautilus protocol and make it lighter, to making it heavier than what I was using in the Nautilus protocol. And then I also started to change in muscularity as well. So in essence, saying, and I think the research kind of bears this out for the most part, heavier loads are superior for building muscle than lighter loads. And there is sort of a threshold. So, I mean, obviously, one would have to define what that means, light and heavy. So I would say heavy loads, where are loads which render muscular failure in the neighborhood of, let's just say, 40 to 50 seconds. And then lighter loads would get you to reach failure around 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Light loads, I should say.
Yeah.
So I found that when my set times, and this was maybe in just after I wrote my book, I found that set times that lasted too long, as in traditional super slow, it wasn't that they weren't effective, but they were less effective for building muscle than heavier loads for a shorter set time. So those things are the things that really made a difference from me being kind of skinny, I guess you could say, to becoming a little bit more robust. I'll never have the kind of muscular density I would love to have because I'm not a mesomorph. But, like I say to my kids when they were young, you get what you get, you don't get upset.
No, thank you for explaining that. There's, just to clarify, you mentioned how your cadence changed, especially when you increase the load to a heavier load. Sounds like, and what I'm hearing is that it was more of an organic cadence, like you try and go fast, but you could only go a certain cadence. You couldn't perhaps do like a 2-1 cadence on a really heavy load. So what was the actual, what was the kind of cadence you're using when you're on those really heavy loads? I appreciate it's a natural cadence, but what is that approximately?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. So what we tell clients and what I do with myself is I make sure to purposefully take a second or two to move the weight the first inch. In other words, if I give you 200 pounds in the chest press, I don't want you to produce 300 pounds of force to move 200 pounds. I want you to produce 201 pounds of force to move the 200 pounds. So I don't want you to start quickly because that's where people get hurt. And then you just continue to push. Once you gradually get it started, then just continue to push hard until you complete the repetition. And generally speaking, it'll take 3, 4, 5 seconds. It depends on the length. Like a hip extension or a leg press or a pullover is a much longer stroke than a wrist curl or a calf press or something of that nature. So the time it takes to complete the rep is kind of determined by the length of the stroke length of the exercise. So typically what you'll see in my gym is people completing the repetitions. The fastest you'll see is 3 to 4 seconds. And then, of course, lowering the weight as slowly as possible to emphasize the negative. There's no point in dropping the weight in 1 to 2 seconds because then you remove the negative. And there seems to be some good evidence that emphasizing the negative is a smart idea for hypertrophy. Then, as you get to your second rep, your third rep, we generally reach failure at around the 6th rep, the 5th or 6th or so with advanced people. Mm-hmm. Obviously, as you get fatigued, the reps are going to slow down further. So, for example, my second to last and last repetition, I am pushing, let's say, or pulling as fast as I can possibly do it, and maybe the last rep or two will last 8, 9, 10, 12 seconds. Simply because at that point I'm so fatigued and the effort is so high. And this is what a lot of I couldn't move fast if I wanted to. It's not possible. And this is one thing I think a lot of the people out there don't understand. You can't move a heavyweight fast. Of course you can't. How could you possibly? Look at the world's strongest man competitions. Look at these guys pulling the tractor trailer up that slight incline and across the finish line. Are they going fast?
No, of course not.
They're barely moving. So you cannot lift a heavy load quickly. And the other part of that, though, is my equipment, which a lot of folks, if you don't have the equipment that I have, it makes a difference. So my equipment has cams and cam effects on them that alter the resistance to match the strength curve of the body. So for example, in a biceps curl, you're strongest in the mid-range. But when you do a biceps curl with strict form, you cannot even budge out of the first inch a resistance that you can handle in the mid-range. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
So you're forced, because it's a free weight, you're forced to make the weight in order to perform several repetitions to failure. You're forced to reduce the amount of weight that you could handle in your strongest range in order to use it from the start point. And this is why many bodybuilders instinctively, they'll do concentration curls, and then they'll do cable curls, because they instinctively know that a single set of barbell curls just isn't doing what they want it to do to build, to cause the effect that they want. But with good machines that have good cams and cam effects, you can. And my machine allows for that, or provides that. So when I give an advanced client a weight load that is proper for their strongest range, in other words, I will be able to give a client a weight load that is proper for his strongest range, because the cam and cam effects in my equipment alter the resistance so that I can do that. And when that happens, when you use equipment like that, and you're using a resistance that's 85% of your 1RM or so, you can't move the weight in 1 second. You cannot possibly lift it in 1 second. And I've invited a lot of people who don't believe that to come to my gym and try it. No one's ever taken me up on it.
Funny that.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, I hope that answers that question well.
Excellent answer, Fred. I appreciate that. You sound like quite a voracious reader. Have you always been a voracious reader from a young age?
Yeah, well, certainly when it comes to this field, when I first started getting into the strength training at the Hospital for Joint Diseases Sports Medicine Center, I really started to read pretty much everything I can get my hands on in terms of strength training and conditioning and aerobics, just to give the clients the very best that I could. And I just got hooked on it. And so if you ask any of my instructors, anybody who knows me, I read pretty much everything I can get my hands on when it comes to this field, almost to a fault, because I haven't read like a novel or a like a fun book, and I can't even remember how long.
I know you're paying.
Probably 3 years. 3 years now. So a lot of the stuff is. A lot of the research on the subject isn't so great, and a lot of it is controversial. So I find that it's important to read both sides of the issue when it comes to both strength training. I like to hear what the NSCA guys have to say. I like to hear what the high carbohydrate advocates have to say. So I think that if you're really being what's the right word? If you really want to be fair to your clients, and of course my clients are everything to me, you have to know and read and understand what Dean Ornish has to say, as much as what Robert Atkins has to say, as much as what my colleague Brad Schoenfeld, who believes you have to lift weights quickly and periodize, has to say. So there's a lot to read. So in short, yes.
It's funny because I was just about to ask you, do you read opposing views? And you answered that without me asking it, which is really nice to see. And I personally find it very challenging to read the views that I kind of disagree with. I think it does take a fair amount of discipline to open a book that you've come into it thinking, I don't agree with this stuff, and you kind of have to leave that at the door, so to speak, and suspend your.
I lost you there.
Oh, sorry. So I was just saying about how it's you have to have a certain amount of discipline to read the opposing view. Whether it be diet, nutrition, or anything else. I just want to shift gears slightly and talk about, ask you some of the questions that listeners have submitted. Hopefully the connectivity stays a little bit. It's a little bit intermittent, but I think we should continue as it's not too bad.
Sure.
So one of my listeners has explained that I think they're probably referring to themselves and people they know have certain mental blocks when trying to reach muscular failure, especially when training solo. What advice do you have for someone who has that roadblock and is trying to reach failure during their workouts?
Well, it's a very good question. What I do with my clients is I sort of give them, when they come to my studio for the first time, I sit them down and I give them about a half hour PowerPoint presentation. And part of the presentation, like one half is nutrition, because we explain to people how important eating well is. If you train well and you don't eat well, forget it. You're not going to get the results that you want, bottom line. And then the other half of it is strength training. And one of the slides I show them is, or two of the slides that I show them is the muscle fibers themselves, and specifically the myofibrils, which are the little teeny fibers inside the main fiber. And I teach them that those are the fibers that we are trying to proliferate. The whole reason why you're here is to build more of those little myofibrils. That's it. That's your goal. Now, since that's your goal, how the heck do we do it? So then I show them another slide, and the slide shows Henneman's size principle, which is a slide that shows that when you perform a set of an exercise, doesn't matter what the exercise is, and let's say you perform 10 repetitions to failure, the very first few repetitions are stimulating what's called the slow twitch, or I explain it as the marathon guy fibers. And then as you get to the middle of the set, you're starting to recruit more of the intermediate, or like the decathlete type of fibers. This is, my analogy isn't exactly right, but this is
it's good
what I use in order to, to get people to understand it. And then only when you're getting to that point where your brain says, oh my God, I can't do another repetition. Only then are you getting to the fast twitch, the type 2X or 2B, whichever the scientists change the lingo all the time. Muscle fibers, which are the ones that are predominantly responsible for strength, muscle size, power, and what have you. They're the non-oxidative fibers. So Henneman's size principle clearly states that those fibers are recruited in order from slow to intermediate to fast. It's not the speed with which you lift the weight. It's the level of effort that you put forth. Now, when you're in a machine or doing a free weight, whatever exercise you're doing, if you stop shy of failure, you chip yourself. So I try to educate them to be greedy with the strength they wish to obtain. So I try to paint a picture in their mind of what they're missing out on. So you're going to come to my gym, right? You're going to give me $100 for a personal training session. And then you're going to get in the machines and you're going to half-ass it? Really? So you know what I mean? So I say to them, look, they'll look at me and they'll say, should I do another one? I'm like, yeah, because you want to be greedy with the strength you wish to obtain. I mean, it's going to cost you $100 a session no matter what you do. So anyway, I find that if I educate them rather than just make them do it, then they understand why they're being tortured, so to speak. And more often than not, that helps them to reach that point of muscular failure. And of course, you have to teach them that burning sensation in the muscles, the lactic acid buildup, what have you, all of that is safe. You have to teach people that the last repetition is actually the safest repetition, as Arthur Jones once said, because you no longer have the strength to hurt yourself at that point. So basically, it's an educational process to get the client to understand the importance of training to failure for best benefits, and that it's actually safe to do so.
Yeah, that's a good answer. So David Landau had a question for you.
Did he?
He did indeed. And he said, and obviously we've touched on diet a bit already, so I have a feeling how you might answer this, but he said, do you still advocate a high-protein diet for optimal muscular development? And if so, would Bill Pell, a vegetarian who won the 1972 Mr. Universe in likely the best shape of his life, would he have been more muscular if he had more protein in his diet, in your opinion?
Well, so the two parts to answer that are one, nobody that I'm aware of advocates a high-protein diet. I am unaware of such a concept. All of the low-carbohydrate advocates like Dr. Jeb Volek, Dr. Richard Feynman, Dr. Michael Eads, and the rest of them, Dr. Johnny Bowden, all advocate high-fat diets that are adequate in protein and low in sugar. So I think people like Dave and many other people misunderstand the concept, maybe because they don't read the books that they should be reading if they're going to talk about the subject. That's part of it. Now, is it possible to be a vegetarian and get adequate protein? Yes. So one would have to look at that bodybuilder's diet and see if in fact he was getting adequate protein, and if he was in the shape that he was in, which since he was in the shape that he was in, I would imagine that he would probably was getting adequate protein and he was fine. Vegetarians often eat eggs. Vegetarians will often eat fish. And you can meet your protein requirements very well eating fish and shellfish. So I don't know what he was eating. I don't know what he was doing. So I can't say. Is it easier to get the essential amino acids and the protein that you need by eating meat? It's a lot easier because the amino acid makeup or profile, I should say, in animal is in their proper ratio. So vegans especially have to be freaking scientists in order to meet the demands, if they want to be a bodybuilder, in order to meet the demands that they require. Is it possible to do it? Yes. Is it difficult? Very.
Yeah, that's a good answer. How do you approach training children?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, so with our Strong Kids, Healthy Kids program, we do first of all, we do very short sessions, 15 minutes, because we find that kids, their attention span, and when I say a kid, I'm talking about kids that are from, say, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, in that range, to, 13, 14, in that range. Kids, teens, once you hit like 14, 15, 16, we do full 30-minute session. And the reason for the 15-minute sessions is just attention span. Kids are easily distracted, and they sometimes can't pay, you need to be, the child needs to be able to pay attention to what the instructor's saying if they're going to do a strength training program. Strength training, obviously lifting weights, can be dangerous, and if you're not paying attention. So if a child is emotionally too young, like my daughter Georgia was 6 years old when she started to train. She just paid attention. And if I said, honey, you got to slow it down, she slowed it down. Honey, keep a tight grip. She kept a tight grip. My younger daughter, Anne, wasn't at that maturity level till she was about 8. It's different for different children. So, and then what we do is we're very, we start the educational process just like we do with the adults. We tell them why it's important to train, why it's important to go slow. And I tell you, kids really, really love to feel their muscles, to feel what it feels like to get stronger. I have never had a child yet, and I've been doing this now since 2008 with kids. I have never once had a kid I never had a kid once that said, to their mom and dad, I don't want to do it anymore. They love it. They love it. So that's how we do it. And of course, we're very with adults, but we're a little extra encouraging with the kids. We'll high-five them when you did 2 more pounds today. One kid the other 200 pounds on the leg press, and I said, you joined the 200 club. Put a little star on his chart there. You know what I mean?
Oh, I love that. It's like the lollipop.
But they love it. They really. And I've had many, many parents tell me how much better their child is doing in their sports. That's a big thing. So one kid, 14 years old, and he's 6'5".
Wow.
He couldn't dunk the basketball. So after about 2 months of strength training. And yes, it had to do with him getting 2 months older too. By his own admission, by doing the slow burn strength training system, he even sent me a video of himself just smashing the ball through the net. So it has strength training. I mean, I think everybody knows this by now. Strength training, almost no matter how you do it, has a profound effect on physical ability. So if you make an athlete stronger, that athlete is going to be able to do anything they already do better. And so, and with kids, it's very important because if they're involved in gymnastics or if they're involved in football or other sports that are dangerous, making them stronger reduces their risk of injury. So that's a very important part of it.
Yeah, no, that's some excellent points. So we're hopping around a little bit here because as you dive into tangents, there are things that I've listed here to cover later, but it's fine. We'll just hop about.
Yeah, whatever.
No,
however you want to do it, it's fine.
Absolutely. So having obviously interviewed quite a few world-class experts on the topic of strength training on this podcast, I'm kind of at that realization or current position where muscular potential is normally achieved almost through almost any application of resistance training. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that. But in other words, I think that most of the conversation I observe online related to muscular hypertrophy might only be related to that last 5% potentially, because I think one's genetic lot dictates 90% of the results from training.
Yeah.
Obviously Doug says how plastic muscle is, and obviously you've got beginner's gains, and then after that, I just sometimes I'm in that place where I kind of think, the protocol doesn't matter a great deal, and we're just really we're wasting time talking about all these little adjustments. What do you make of that? What's your opinion on all of that?
If I can address, it's never, in my opinion, it's never a waste of time to talk about how you can do anything slightly better than you've done it before. So if you were a car manufacturer and you wanted to build a better engine, and you were an engineer with your engineer buddies, all you would be doing all day long is trying to find even the most minute way to change something in your design to make it a little bit better, right? Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't just say, the hell with the details. And, anyway, we'll build an engine. We can build an engine any old way and it'll still work. And they'd be right? But there's a big difference between the engine in a Mercedes and an engine in a Yugo. There's a reason why the Mercedes costs $80,000 and why the Yugo costs $20,000. So, and the reason for that is because the automobile is superior. So, is there a way to make a strength training protocol or a strength training machine superior to a barbell, superior to just flinging the weight up in the air and dropping it down? So and the answer has to be yes. The answer can't be no. Mm. So a lot of the times trainers are, what's the right word without insulting anybody? Lazy. They don't want to think about things. Imagine if, think about this. Here's an example. Think about the way many trainers talk about the minutiae. They say, dude, man, Fred, why you gotta care about the minutiae, man? Just lift the heavy weight, lift heavier, go home. Yeah. But they would never do that about their diet. Eat the fuck whatever you want, man. Hell no, they don't. Bodybuilders know that they have to be nutritional scientists to get the very best results from their diet, right? Don't they?
Yeah.
They carry their chicken breasts in plastic bags that they weigh to make sure the exact amount of ounces so they get the exact amount of protein they need. So why wouldn't we want to, unless we're just being lazy about it, try to find ways to make our strength training protocol better? Now, here's an example. I was at the Epic, if I can go on about this a little bit, if you don't mind.
Please do.
I was at the Epic Fitness Summit last summer. And I had a debate with Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, who I found to be a really nice guy, and a whole bunch of other folks were there debating different kind of strength training protocols, nutritional protocols. And I said to the crowd, how many of you, raise your hand, how many people in here are personal trainers? And pretty much everybody raised their hand. I said, oh, this is fantastic. Okay, let me ask you a question. And here's the question. The question is this. If the results were the same, in other words, if you were training a client and you knew God came down from heaven and told you that the results would be the same, and by results I mean increased muscle tissue, increased bone density, all of the benefits that strength training can bestow upon a person. If the results were the same, would you A, have your client lift the weight as explosively and as fast as possible, or B, with a very slow and controlled tempo? If the result was exactly the same. So let's say you built 10 pounds of muscle. Who here, raise your hand if you would choose to tell your client, 65-year-old Mary Smith, to lift the weight explosively? Everybody raised their hand.
Really?
Really? I was in shock. So in other words, what these, and let me just backtrack. I had prefaced that question by saying force equals mass times acceleration. Obviously, the faster you lift the same weight, the more force you're producing, and the more force you produce potentially can cause a greater injury. Obviously, right? If Mike Tyson punches you in the face as slowly as possible, nothing's going to happen.
Great
right?
analogy.
So I prefaced it by saying, and you don't get to vote on this subject. Obviously, the faster you lift the same weight, the more force you're producing, the more dangerous the lift becomes. And they still all raised their hand. I could not believe it. So this is a roundabout way of saying, if training slower is safer, then it's better if the results are the same, right? Mm-hmm. So that's not minutia.
Oh, I completely.
That's a very...
Yeah, I completely agree. Just to interject quickly.
And if training to failure recruits is the best way to recruit the fast twitch muscle fibers, then a single set to failure is going to be better than multiple sets not to failure. So that's not minutia either. So if you actually were to, if your thesis paper on strength training part of it was to list everything that scientific research shows is the very best way to produce hypertrophy, what would those things be? It wouldn't be not training to failure. It would be training to failure. It would be making sure that the set is safe. It would, the list would go on. And so I think that the trainers and the coaches and these guys who say, you're dealing with minutia now, man. It's all, I think that's just lazy thinking, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good answer. I think I didn't do a very good job in wording that question, because I guess what I meant is, if you look at the high intensity training niche, so people that are, they've really bought into the one set to failure protocols, I guess they're working from a body by science type start, or your book, Slow Burn. If you look at, for example, Doug McGuff's blog, and you look at the debates going back and forth about fatigue and inroading and muscular tension and load and all those nuances. So, we're even going further. I guess what I'm asking is, how important is all that stuff? Is that going to give you, don't get me wrong, I'm the same as you. I'm always looking for marginal improvement in all of my life, and I'm all for that. But I think sometimes I think people are talking about these subtle nuances and thinking in their head, there's a magic bullet here that I'm trying to find, or making this subtle change is going to give me 30 pounds of muscle, and they're already doing one set to failure kind of training infrequently. So
I know but it is so that's a hard question. It kind of revolves around I think what you just said was good though. What you just said was, giving me 30 pounds more muscle, right? Something like that. Mm-hmm. So I think the problem around the minutia is the fact that people want to achieve a certain physique that they will never, ever, ever achieve. Most people cannot look like those guys you see who you want to look like. It's just not possible. So they're digging for, they're looking for the keys where the light's better, where they lost their keys where the light's better. So they're into the minutia of it because, like you said, they really think they can build 30 pounds of muscle because their friend Joe did. And so that's the problem, is that there's not enough, what's the right word? There's not enough honesty in this field. And it's one of the reasons why, if you ever notice on Facebook, anytime I can, I point out on Facebook pages that I'm part of, I try to point out the people who are taking steroids and who are taking drugs.
Right.
Because you look at these guys and they say, oh yeah, I do this, that, and the other thing, and they're taking drugs, and it's a lie. And so it's a way to sort of lure people into their world by their books, by their products, by their supplements. But I think that the discussions around this are built upon the false idea that you can have that 30 extra pounds of muscle when you just can't.
Yeah.
So
that was a good answer. Moving on to diet in a little bit more detail, and it touches on what you were talking about the kind of high fat, low carbohydrate diet you currently consume. So Tim Ferriss recently did a ketogenic diet experiment, which was obviously kind of 85, 90% fat, and he claims to have gained a non-trivial amount of muscle since shifting from his slow carb diet. I know you mentioned earlier you don't know the specific mechanism, but it fascinates me as to how do you think that's legit, that he suddenly gained more muscle through a high fat diet, and if so, why do you think that is, if you know? Or have an opinion?
Well, that's my problem. I have an opinion on everything, right?
That's cool.
Tim is a friend of mine, and I know Tim.
Oh, cool.
And Tim, I don't know if you remember, really early on when he first wrote the 4-Hour Work Week. It might have been before, but he did an experiment, and he called it Geek to Freak.
I'm very familiar with that. I've tried it myself.
Right. So he and Ellington Darden has done this many times in his books with people, where you take somebody who's relatively untrained, you feed them well, and then you put them through a couple of high-intensity workouts with enough adequate recovery, and you can build an impressive amount of muscle like that. Some people, like I was saying before, some people can build more, some people less, but you can build an impressive amount of muscle like that. So it's hard to know whether or not Tim built more muscle because he went to a ketogenic diet, or because he trained harder, or because he was using better equipment, or because he got better sleep because he does these sleep experiments, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, cause and correlation. I see where you're going with this. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now, with a ketogenic diet, almost always, if you go from a typical high carbohydrate diet to a ketogenic diet, you almost always increase the total amount of protein you eat, because that's where your fat comes from. Usually, is from your meat, unless you're unless you're slurping coconut oil, which maybe he did. I didn't read all of the details of it, but so there's just too many variables to know if it was simply the ketogenic diet that he benefited from or not.
But it sounds like the bottom line is that actually with a high fat diet, you can grow muscle. You can be the best phenotype that you can be. Would you agree with that?
We know that you need fatty. That's why I say to my clients, you need to eat fatty proteins, not lean proteins, because if you recall from from Stefansson's book, the Arctic, what was it called? The Friendly Arctic. I have that book. I read it, but I don't remember if it was in that book specifically. But in any event, when the men ran out of rations and that all they could eat was very, very lean animals, they starved to death even though they had adequate protein, because there was not enough fat. The protein was too lean. It builds up, I think it's ammonia. I can't recall the exact physiological mechanisms by which it poisoned the ammonia buildup, I think it was. But unless you have adequate fat in your diet, you can have all the protein in the world. So if your diet is kind of low in fat-ish, and if you increase the fat, possibly that's what's happening. The amino acid uptake becomes superior, and potentially that would be one reason why. I am not a nutritional expert. I know a lot about it, but I'm not an expert. But I can see how that might be one of the mechanisms by which you could add muscle tissue eating the same amount of protein you were eating before, because now you have more fat that is allowing for a greater, superior amino acid uptake. That's one thing that might be going on.
what is your current diet and training regimen in detail, if you don't mind? We love the details of all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So typically, well, let's see. I get up in the morning, I have a cup of coffee with coconut milk or maybe heavy cream.
Okay.
And I put MCT oil in the cream and I mix it with cinnamon. And I have a cup of coffee like that every morning. And I think the MCT oil, from what I've read and what I believe, it helps with create more ketones, which gives you a little more energy, get your brain cooking. You know, what's his name with the Bulletproof Coffee, Dave Asprey.
Yep.
With the Bulletproof Coffee, stuff like that. I mean, is it a gimmick? I don't know. Is it true? There seems to be some evidence to suggest that by increasing blood ketones, it is beneficial for energy and brain power, I guess you could say. And then I will have a big giant mug of homemade chicken stock that I make pretty much every month. And in the cup of chicken broth, I put like Himalayan salt, a little like garlic salt mixture, a pinch or two of dulse, which is a type of seaweed for the iodine. Sometimes I'll crack an egg in it and mix it up as well, get a little extra fat in there. And I have that in the morning before I eat any food. You know, a big glass of water with some vitamins and stuff like that.
What time are we talking about for that chicken stock? What's the sort of time frame?
You mean to cook it, you mean?
No, in terms of when you consume it.
Oh, right, like with my coffee in the morning, first thing in the morning.
Okay.
And I take, like a multivitamin, vitamin D, some, just extra vitamins and minerals here and there. And then, so then I'll go to work and I'll get to one of the studios and I'll usually have for breakfast a couple of tins of sardines and olive oil, a couple, 3, 4 forkfuls of kimchi or sauerkraut. I like to eat, like the other morning, I went to a store called Zabar's where they have all kinds of really great food, and I bought some salmon roe, the eggs of the salmon.
Yeah.
And I just ate like 3 or 4 spoonfuls of that. What else then? Chopped liver. I had some liver. Liver is good for you. And then, so then I'll eat again whenever I feel hungry, so if that's so let's say now it's about 9 o'clock in the morning. So I've had my coffee with my cream and my MCT oil. I've had my bone broth with an egg or so. And then I have my 2 tins of sardines, my salmon eggs, some kimchi or sauerkraut. And if it's 9 o'clock after eating that, I don't even think about food till maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon or so. Maybe 1, maybe 3. And as soon as my brain says food, then it'll be, let's say, half a chicken, a roasted chicken with some roasted, like a mix of vegetables like broccoli, carrots, whatever is there in the tray from the place I get it. Or I might go across the street. What's really great, right across the street from my gym in the city is now a gluten-free, because I'm gluten intolerant, a gluten-free restaurant. And so sometimes I'll go in there and I'll get a prosciutto salad and meatballs. And then dinner is almost always a hunk of meat, whether it's steak or lamb chops or chicken, something of that nature, and either a salad or more sauerkraut or roasted. My wife will often make roasted vegetables. I don't really like vegetables, to tell you the truth. I really don't. But I know that they're good for my gut bugs, they're good for the bacteria in your intestines. So I eat some of it, and that's pretty much how I eat every day. And then I drink wine. I probably drink too much wine, but I drink wine. I have, 1, 2, 3, 4 glasses of wine pretty much every night.
Wow, really?
Yeah, that's my downfall. So
red wine, is that, sorry? Red wine normally, or white wine?
Yeah, I like red wine. I like Bordeaux. I do like Pinot Grigio. I don't drink beer anymore at all. And I rarely drink liquor. Like, I like a good scotch, but I generally don't drink any of that. And that's basically the reason why I'm not as lean as I could be, because I drink wine. So, do you have a cheat day or a free day where you eat? Do you ever eat junk food or anything like that? Aside from the truth is, I consider, like, here's what I will do every once in a while, especially after a train. If I want something like that after a training day, I will eat a gluten-free pizza, like a really thin crust gluten-free pizza that has prosciutto and sausage and bacon and anchovies and fresh mozzarella cheese and arugula on it, something of that nature, which is, I mean, most of what's on it isn't junk food. It's real food. But of course, the thin crust itself is going to be like tapioca. What do they use usually? Like rice flour, tapioca flour, maybe almond flour, something of that. So I wouldn't necessarily call that junk food. But the kind of food that we all think of as junk food, I can honestly tell you, I never, ever, ever, ever eat it, ever. So I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah. Is that because you don't feel that the craving, or that you don't respond well to it because of your intolerance, or what's the kind of motive behind that? So basically, what I was saying was, do you find that one of the reasons you mentioned obviously the pizza that you have, which is not quite like having a McDonald's or something like that. But do you find that you don't have any cravings for junk food, or do you just find, because personally you don't respond well to it because of your gluten intolerance?
Yeah, well, that's certainly because I do have a very strong gluten intolerance. For example, if I drink a beer and eat a traditional piece of pizza, I get a really bad rash on my chest and on my face. Like it's like almost like an eczema. My joints swell. I've done it. I've like experimented so many times that I just know that it's true. And whether it's the gluten or whether it's the gliadin or whatever it is, those foods that are traditionally that have gluten in them, those kinds of foods wreak havoc on my body. So, but I have to say, as far as cravings go, no, I don't really crave anything like bad like that. I think that craving is often a need for energy, need for sugar. When you crave foods like that, and this is my speculation, and I think maybe some people have, experts in nutrition have talked about this as being true, it's really like people who eat a very high refined carbohydrate diet, they often get the jitters and they're ravenous. And so they crave the food that they know is going to calm that down. So like someone who's hooked on cocaine, do they crave cocaine? Well, really what they crave is the feeling they're going to get once they have it. So when you eat a high-fat, adequate protein, low-sugar diet, your blood sugar remains very stable throughout the entire day. And so the quote-unquote cravings don't come because of that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I found that to be the same for me. One thing I was telling you earlier was about, this mild headache I've got, which thankfully has kind of, died down during the course of this conversation. But yesterday I had one of those sort of, off the handle cheat days. And I always, because I eat, generally most of the time, well, I kind of follow, I suppose, Tim's subscription and the slow carb diet. So I eat really well 6 days a week and then maybe have the one day off. But I've tried more to be kind of more towards the way you're describing, which is to try never to have a cheat day at all, and just see how that benefits me. Because like you, I can really, I can feel the impact. Because you become sensitive to the change because you're so used to feeling great. And it's a question I asked David, David Landau. I said, because his diet isn't great, and he was quite honest about that. And I said, how do you feel when you eat that food, junk food and the like? And he just said, I feel great, and if I feel tired, I just have a coffee. Which was
I think a lot of people who eat like that, who have that sort of nonchalance about food, where they'll go to Popeyes, they'll go to McDonald's, they'll do whatever they want as if it doesn't matter. I think many people like that, they don't know what feeling good really feels like.
Yeah, I agree with you. Good stuff. Okay, so moving on to just a couple questions about business I wanted to ask you, actually.
Sure.
Your Serious Strength business, is it over two locations? I noticed on the website, or is there more locations than that?
No, currently brick and mortar, we have two locations, one on the Upper West Side of Manhattan on West 78th Street between Amsterdam and Columbus Avenue. And then my second facility now, as I mentioned, it's a year anniversary this last month, is in Montclair, New Jersey, in Watchung Plaza. So those two locations are the two gyms that I currently have now.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So in your words, what were the key activities, I guess the force multipliers, if any, that really help you successfully grow your business? If you can remember those moments and those actions, if there were any sort of main tipping points for you.
That help make the business be successful, you mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I would say it's a combination of things, but probably the most important thing is finding instructors. The instructors that I have, the team that I have, is top notch. They're people who really, really, truly care about the clients, who are able to. They're what's the right word? They're just compassionate and caring, and very serious about what they do. In the right, serious meaning that they take a lot of pride and a lot of care in caring for the clients, and that's something that I think I am like. Where it's not, in our gym, it's very atypical of what you might see personal trainer. And I'm not saying these kinds of trainers don't care about their clients, but for example, when you come to my gym and you train, right? We have your chart ready. The trainer is never, ever, ever late for the appointment. If anybody's late, it's going to be the client. On a rare instance, it might happen because a train was late, but I don't have trainers that just nonchalantly show up and say, "Oh yeah, sorry, I was eating my lunch." So when the client shows up at 5 to 9 for their 9 o'clock appointment, right? Mm-hmm. The session starts at 9 o'clock. They're in a machine at 9 o'clock sharp, and then the trainer puts them through an exercise and watches them like a hawk. Looks at them, makes sure they're breathing, encourages them through the entire set, the entire time they're in the gym. Our trainers never answer their phone. In fact, they're not allowed to have their phones in the gym with them. They never walk away from the client and say, "Hey, yeah, do 10 reps, I'll be right back," or anything like that. So the attention to the client is something that is, I think, vital to how the client perceives the value of what they're getting. That's just one thing. So, and then the session is done at 9:28 or 9:29. And then the 9:30 client starts at 9:30. And 10 o'clock client starts at 10 o'clock. And in that session, we're also talking about how are you eating? You make sure you get adequate protein. So the conversation, unless the client starts the conversation differently. Unless they say, "Hey, it was your birthday yesterday. How'd things go?" Of course we'll make small talk. But for us, for our instructors don't engage the client in wasteful small talk. We're always talking to the client about how they're eating. How does their knee feel because they went skiing and they hurt it. We know a doctor we can recommend. All kinds of things like that. So the entire half hour is spent on careful instruction in each machine and talking about their health, their nutritional program, so on and so forth. So the client, for that half hour that client is there, we do 15-minute sessions and half-hour sessions. They're getting a very high value out of the time. So that's, if you go to typical gyms, they walk away from their clients, talk on their phones, they go talk to their friend, they don't show up on time, and that, of course, never happens in our gym. The second thing about it is that we are very efficient at what we do. You really only need to come to us once or twice a week. Most people think that they have to do their strength training 3 to 4 times a week. They have to do their cardio 3-4 times a week. They have to stretch every day. They have to count their calories. And so they say, "Oh, you know what, forget this. I can't do this." So we make the experience not only of the highest quality, but extraordinarily time efficient. So that, and obviously very productive. If what I did wasn't productive, I don't think I'd be in business for 19 years, especially dealing with New Yorkers. Right. So that's another aspect of what I do that I think has made the gym so successful. We also keep the gym extraordinarily clean, well ordered, and if something else comes to me, but really the number one thing is the quality of the instructors. They're amazing people. And then just the efficiency and the cleanliness of what we do as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting hearing you say that, because it's a common theme across a lot of the other sort of high intensity gym type facilities or business owners. It's this big focus on really high level, intelligent personal trainers who really pay attention to the client and give a really high quality service. What advice would you have, or do you have, for someone looking to start a business in this industry using these types of training protocols?
Well, first of all, are you willing to work your frigging ass off? That's because the question was start the business, right?
Indeed.
All right. So there's none of this going to start at 10 o'clock in the morning stuff. You got to get your rear end out of bed at about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and you have to start training people at 5 o'clock in the morning because people want to come before work. And then you have to be willing to stay there till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Now, that's hard work, and you have to work 7 days a week because some people want to come on Saturday and Sunday. Now, remember, I'm talking about establishing the business. You're not going to have to work that hard once you start to build a client base and once you start to train other instructors to take some of the load. Now, you have to establish that business. And the second thing about that is location. You have to make sure that the location that you choose is the correct location. That's an extraordinarily important part of it. So, if the rent around the corner is $15 a square foot, but right on street level it's $25 a square foot, take that street level facility. You can't cheap out on location. Now, obviously, you have to do your homework and you have to do your P&L, your profit and loss sheet, and you have to figure out with maybe a good financial advisor, how much can you actually afford in rent? You can't charge $200 for a personal training session, right? So you have to sit down and do the math, and you have to be very, very, very good at that, to sit down and do your business plan, do your P&L, and make sure those numbers are going to work. So you need to figure out, well, if the rent is this much and I can only charge this much and I have to make this much, what's it going to be? At the end of the day, you don't want to have a $15 a square foot space and no one walking in, as opposed to a $25 a square foot space and you're constantly getting new people coming in, even though you're paying more. But of course, there's a ceiling, so you have to figure that out from a financial standpoint. So you got to do your P&L, you got to do your business plan, and do it with somebody who knows what they're doing. You can do your own business plan and buy one of those, online services and figure it out for yourself. But if you don't think that you know what you're doing, that means you don't know what you're doing. And so find somebody who really does. And then eventually you learn, and then you can, do it on your own. But you really got to work with somebody who knows, because there are so many hidden expenses that you might not know about, that you really, really got to go through it. Toilet paper and pencils add up, let me tell you. A personal training gym alone, in other words, a gym where there's no general membership, so that you can truly give clients a private, quiet, serene, serious, focused workout, is not a money-making venture. I'm going to say that again, or I should say it like this. A studio like mine, you're working off of a very low profit margin. You can make a profit, but it's a low profit margin. So that's one of the reasons why you have to make sure that your P&L and your business plan is very carefully crafted. And that's the reason why bigger gyms like Equinox and New York Sports Club, New York Health and Rack Up, they all have general memberships, because that's where they make their money. Because if they only relied on personal training, they would go out of business. So that's another important. So that's an important part of it. And you really, I guess it goes without saying, but you really, really, truly have to love what you do, and you really have to love the client. You really have to care, deeply care about what their needs are and what they want and who they are. If you don't, if you're just an actor who doesn't want to wait tables and you think you're going to make money by being a trainer and you're just going to open up a gym, forget about it.
Joe, a friend of mine made a point recently and said, how if you're putting a person through a workout that might only last 10 to 15 minutes, how can you justify, a typical personal trainer hourly fee for that one session?
Okay. That's a good question.
How do you, because so I obviously know, and I'm sure the listeners understand the value in high intensity training, but how do you articulate the value and convince clients to do that? And to pay for something that might only last 10 or 15 minutes, and to pay from what you said earlier, a substantial fee.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Number one thing you have to get across to the client is, what is your time worth? What is your time worth? So, for example, here's a few examples of what I'll say to people, and it kind of depends on the person, but I'll say, so a client will come in and say, oh, it's $95, $100 for a personal training session. It's only a half an hour. I could go to the Equinox and pay $95 for the hour. And I say to them, yes, I know that. Do you want to spend an hour getting the results that you want? Or do you want to spend a half hour getting the same results? And then I'll use an analogy. I'll say, imagine if you wanted to get your teeth clean, deeply scaled and clean. It's a painful process, but it's a really good thing to do. All right? Now, there's one hygienist that you go to. She's really good. And in an hour, you come out, you pay her $175, and your teeth are sparkling and you love it. Now you go to another hygienist that somebody else recommends. You pay the same price, $175, and she gives you the same result in 30 minutes. Where are you going to go next time? Right?
Right, okay.
Okay, so you're going to go to the hygienist that takes a half an hour if the result is the same. Now imagine if the result was better. There's no question that you'd go to that hygienist and only spend a half an hour in her chair as opposed to an hour in the chair. So what we're doing here is we're educating the client that the money you're giving me is for a result. The money you're paying me is for a result. And then I'll say, imagine what I would charge you if you walked in my door, right? And I touched your shoulder and I gave you the benefits of a hour personal training session in one split second. Do you know what I would charge you for that?
What would you charge?
I would charge more.
You charge more.
I would charge more. I'd charge $150 for a personal training session. Because now you don't have to do anything.
Right, got
I've
it.
saved you pain. I've saved you time. So the bottom line is, what is your time worth? And I'll give you another example. So I had a woman come in one day. This is years ago. And she comes down. She's, I got your brochure in the flyer box. This sounds good. Only 30 minutes. Oh, $95. That's so expensive for 30 minutes. And I tried to talk to her, and I clearly failed in convincing her. Some people just don't want to hear it. So while she was there was a man sitting in my massage chair, and his name, I won't name his name, but he's a multi-millionaire, top CEO for one of the largest insurance companies in the world. And she leaves, and he's reading the newspaper, right? And he puts the newspaper down, and he peers over his bifocals at me, and he did this to make me feel better, because he saw that I lost the sale. I failed to educate. So he peers over the newspaper, over his bifocals, and he says, Fred, do you know how much money I make an hour? And before I could even answer him, he goes, do you know how much money you saved me by coming here? And then he flipped his paper back up and kept reading. So again, it boils down to, the bottom line is, what is your time worth? And here's another thing that I do, and this is, I think, a good thing for business owners to do. Let me just say this too. If you're going to start a business, okay, you must read the book Jumpstart Your Business Brain and Jumpstart Your Marketing Brain by Brian Hall. Okay. Got to read those books, Jumpstart Your Business Brain, Jumpstart Your Marketing Brain. So, what was I saying?
You were talking about the argument convincing those that feel like it's expensive to pay a lot of money for what is only 10 or 15 minutes of training.
Right.
You're talking about the millionaire who...
Yeah, right. Basically the bottom line is what I was saying was that these kinds of... I know what I was saying about the guarantee. So what I do is I say to all my clients that we guarantee your results, and this is how we do it. If you come to me twice a week for 25 sessions, consecutive sessions, 25 consecutive sessions, if you miss one or two, no big deal. And you can honestly look me in the eye and say that you have followed my nutritional plan for you, which is essentially a high-fat adequate protein, low sugar diet. If you can honestly look me in the eye, man to man, woman to woman, and say that I followed your nutritional plan and I came here I can see that you came 25 times. If for any reason you don't think this worked or you're unhappy, I will write you a check for every dime you paid me for the training. I will refund all your money for the 25 sessions you did. And in the book, Jumpstart Your Business Brain, they talk about three things. One is you have to give people an overt benefit. You have to give them a real reason to believe that they will achieve that overt benefit. And then you have to give them a guarantee with no asterisk attached to it. Those three elements are the three most important elements that a business owner can or should use when developing their business. So when someone says to me, well, how do I know that I can get the same benefits in 30 minutes that I would get for 60 minutes? I say, I guarantee it. You don't like it? I'll give you your money back. And I've only ever had one person ask me for their money back. I'll be honest with you.
After 25 sessions.
What's funny about what's that?
After 25 sessions, they ask for their money back.
Yeah. Well, at the 24th session, she goes, "Well, are you going to honor the refund?" I said to her, "Yes, of course. I will honor the refund." And she goes, "Because I just have to be honest and say I'm going to be asking you for a refund on the 24th session." So I said, "Jane, okay, I'll write you a check." And then she said, "Well, aren't we going to go in and train?" I went, "What? No, we're not going to train. I'm not going to give you another session and then give you your money back. If you're telling me you'll be asking me for your refund, that makes this your last. That makes your last session you did with me last week the last one." And then she said to me, because I'm telling you this because it's just funny. And then she said to me, "Okay, well, that's all right. I get it, but well, could we at least take the time today? Could you just show me how to do the slow burn techniques in my home?" That's ridiculous. And I said, "No, because they don't work, right?" And then she said, "Well, I just want to let you know, I don't want you to feel bad about this, but I've referred so many people to you." And I'm like, so long story short, I did have to refund the money once, and it was because the person that I gave the money back to was out of their cotton picking mind.
Yeah, it sounds like she had a screw loose. Sounds like she's very broke.
I don't know. It was funny. I got to say.
On the vein of, you recommended a couple books there. What books do you most often recommend in not only in health and fitness, but also in business? So there's both of those kind of topics, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. Well, in business, so the Jumpstart Your Marketing and Business Brain, those two. And then there's a series of books called The Wizard of Ads. It's three books, and the author's name. Why am I spacing it out? William. Well, it doesn't matter. If you Google
your ketones.
Yeah, I know it, right. It's called I haven't had my bone broth yet. You see what happened? It's if you just Google the Wizard of Ads, those books are fantastic too. It really helps with marketing and thinking about how you present your marketing materials to the public. So those books are very, very good. What other book? I've read so many. I can't think of any other ones that I've read. Oh, yes, right. So my wife just reminded me. All of the marketing books by Seth Godin, Godin, are fantastic as well. They're very similar in philosophy to The Wizard of Ads, very similar. His books are always great. The Purple Cow is probably the first one of Seth's books you should read, because the Purple Cow, the premise of the Purple Cow is being remarkable. Now, what do we mean by that? So this is a very important business concept. Let's say you go to a restaurant and the service is really good, right? Mm-hmm. That's not remarkable. It better be, right? What's remarkable is something that's worth remarking about. So, and what I mean by that is, like, you go to a restaurant and the service is good and the food is really good, and then the waiter comes over to you with a platter of special little tidbits that the chef decided to give to you for free. And so this is compliments of the chef. And the bartender comes over and says, "You know what? I saw that the chef gave you those complimentary hors d'oeuvres. You need a glass of champagne. You need this champagne to go with that." Now you're sitting there going, whoa, this is great. Now, when you leave that restaurant, you're going to remark about that experience to your friends and people you know. So how do you make your gym remarkable? How do you make your personal training remarkable? Not just adequate. Like, we keep our place spotless. It better be.
Yeah.
But so there are things that in our field that people who are used to personal training are used to, like their trainer not showing up, or their trainer being late, or their trainer talking on the phone while they're training them. There's a million different things that people who have experienced personal training in the past are used to, that no matter where they go, they get the same thing. So, but when you come to us, it becomes the fact that we don't do those things, and other things that we do are remarkable, and it's worth remarking about. I can get you in shape as easily and more easily and in better shape in my 30 minutes twice a week, or even 15 minutes twice a week, than the typical trainer can get somebody doing 3 or 4 hour-long sessions at the gym. That's remarkable.
Yeah.
So, so between Seth's books, Brian Hall's books, Jumpstart Your Marketing Brain, and The Wizard of Ads, I think those 3. You know what was really another good business book? Believe it or not, I hate that I'm going to say this, but Trump's book called Think Big and Kick Ass. It was actually good, I have to say. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about confidence in that book.
Interesting.
But the right kind of confidence, not like the kind of confidence that comes from caring for people and trying to do the best job you possibly can. Even if you fall short, your client sees that you really are attempting to do the best that you can. You know what I mean?
Okay. What about in the kind of health and fitness space? What obviously you got your own book, but in addition, what other books might you recommend to people there?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. So I recommend, books and or reading materials, right? So if you haven't read the blog of Dr. Michael Eads, and he doesn't blog that much anymore, but the archival stuff is fantastic. And of course, his books, Protein Power Life Plan. What is the other one? The more recent one he did was...
That's all right. We can find it. We can...
Yeah, his books are very good. Training books by Dr. Jeff Volek. The TNT Diet, that's very good. Dr. Johnny Bowden's health and nutritional books are very good. The work of, from a recipe standpoint, the books by Dana Carpenter, not Carpenter, Carpenter, Dana Carpenter. She has amazing recipe books for healthful eating, keeping sugar low, keeping protein adequate. The blog of Dr. Richard Feynman, if you really want to listen to a true nutritional expert, as opposed to some of these guys on the internet. I won't name names, but you know who you are. Dr. Richard Feynman really is, like Dr. Volek, they really are truly nutritional experts. So his blog is a very good resource for learning about diet and nutrition.
Excellent. No, thank you for bringing those blogs up, because that's those resources are just as valuable, if not more valuable, than a lot of books out there. What have you changed your mind about in the last year in the realm of strength training, if anything?
In the last year, let's see. That's a good question. I don't think one thing that Dr. Brad Schoenfeld brought up in our debate at the Epic Fitness Summit last June, he said a couple of things that intrigued me. Since then, Dr. James Steele and Fisher have done a review that sort of countered this, but he brought up the idea that training with lighter loads for longer set times might be a superior stimulus for the slow twitch muscle fibers to hypertrophy, because they do hypertrophy. So for example, and this goes back to the periodization model, where some days you train heavy, some days you train medium, you train low, and that he seemed to say he had good evidence to suggest that there was good evidence to suggest that doing a set with a lighter load for more repetitions would preferentially hypertrophy the slow twitch muscle fibers, the oxidative muscle fibers. So I started to do a little bit of experimenting with that after the Epic Fitness Summit, and what I did was basically lighten up the loads and do longer set times, or do breakdown sets. So I would do a set. Usually my sets I will reach muscle fatigue in about 3 repetitions. So the total set will last me 45 seconds, 55 seconds, depending. And then I would immediately do a breakdown set. I would cut the weight in half and continue to do repetitions until fatigue, which might bring me to another level of fatigue in around the 90-second mark or so, or 100-second mark or something like that.
Right.
So I've been doing that for quite a while. Personally, I don't see any benefit to it. I don't feel larger. I don't weigh any more on the scale. And if it's working, and my diet isn't changing, and I eat adequate protein, you'd think that I'd weigh, like right now, I generally weigh between around 173 to 175 pounds.
Okay.
So after doing this since June, you'd think that maybe I'd hit 178 or maybe 180, like I could build 2-3 pounds more muscle. Now, it could be that because I'm 54 years old, I've been training for so many years that I've maximized what I can have. And obviously there has to be a maximal. You can't keep getting larger and larger and larger and larger forever.
Yeah.
So maybe it doesn't work for me anymore, but perhaps it would work for other folks. I don't know. But then if you look at the work, the meta-analysis and review of the research that they did, which was comprehensive. I'm not a big fan of meta-analyses at all. I'm much more of a fan of looking at each individual study and judging the study on its own merit, because as Mary Dan Eads, my co-author on the Slow Burn Fitness Revolution, once said, if you tortured the data enough, it will confess. And often with meta-analyses, this is what researchers and scientists will do to support their confirmation bias about anything. But in any event, I thought their meta-analysis was well done, and it showed that breakdown sets don't seem to have any added benefit for increasing muscular strength. To be fair to them, they didn't, well, not to be fair to them, but to be fair to the listeners, they didn't measure hypertrophy. But generally speaking, hypertrophy is an outcome of greater strength. In other words, you don't ever see studies where there's significant hypertrophy and no increases in strength. You know what I'm saying?
I agree. Yeah.
So now, is it possible to increase strength significantly and not measure any noticeable hypertrophy? Yes, that does happen. And I think that happens more often than not because since the studies are generally short, 6 to 8 weeks, the starting strength is often improperly determined. So you'll see sometimes people go up in strength by, let's say, 12 kilograms over the course of 6 weeks, right? Yeah. But had they given them that 12 kilogram extra at the very start of the study, they could have lifted that too, albeit maybe for a shorter repetition time, but they still would have been capable of it. So they actually, over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, technically, they really didn't increase their strength at all. And so you don't see any gains in hypertrophy because they really didn't actually gain any strength. But remember, the very important point is the converse is never true. So it's food for thought there. So in my experience, I've tried it. I thought that what Brad had to say was very interesting, but it doesn't seem to have panned out for me. I tried it with a few of my clients. I don't see any different. And again, Henneman's size principle is pretty clear that by the time you reach muscle failure with a decent amount of resistance, you're stimulating all of the slow, intermediate, and fast twitch muscle fibers. So, I mean, if you want to talk about minutia, I think periodization is minutia. It's just it's a colossal waste of the typical person's time to perhaps maybe stimulate some of the slow twitch muscle fibers a little bit better.
Joe, it's just occurred to me that when I asked you about diet and training, we only talked about diet. So it'd be very interesting to hear about your current training regimen in terms of frequency and your workout protocol.
Yeah, well, I sort of said a few things about what I do, but so I typically train, if I'm being a good boy, I will generally train twice a week. I find that training twice a week seems to give me the best benefit. Sometimes I'll train once a week because I just get busy and whatever it is. I certainly do not lose any strength if I only train once a week. So let's just say my frequency is once or twice a week. I will perform anywhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 exercises, and I usually train my whole body, but I emphasize lower body more on one day and upper body more on the other day. But I generally train my full body at each session. I do one of each exercise to muscle fatigue using a resistance that brings about that fatigue in a minimum of about 40 seconds, maybe 35 seconds, and a maximum of about 70 seconds or so, maybe 80 seconds. Because you never know sometimes. Sometimes you feel like you can't do another repetition, and you come down and you attempt another repetition, and you wind up getting two more. Sometimes you complete a repetition, and you feel like you got two more in you. You can't even budge the next one. You never know. You never know. And that's one of the reasons why I say to my clients, if you complete a rep, always try, and you never know. And so a typical routine might be chest fly or pec deck, arm cross, whatever you want to call it, and then to the chest press. And then I'll do a compound row, a front grip pull down, lateral raise for the shoulder, overhead press for the shoulder, tricep extension, biceps curl, abdominal crunch, cervical extension, cervical flexion, and then leg press. And then on another routine, I'll do hip abduction, leg curl, leg extension, hip adduction, lumbar extension, torso rotation, and what's called behind the neck pull downs. Exactly what it sounds, but another type of pulling movement and dip, and that would be routine 2. And I'll generally keep the routine exactly the same each time I do it. And I think one of the most important things is to add weight, and often I'll add weight fractionally. So I'll only add sometimes as little as a half a pound to the bar. So I'll be doing 500 pounds on the pull down, the next 500 and a half, and the next time 501. And as long as time stays relatively the same, I just keep adding resistance. Now, what I've learned, especially with me and with veteran clients who've been training for a year, I can sometimes add a pound, just 1 pound, and I do the exercises in the same exact order. And by adding the pound, rather than get 46 seconds to fatigue, I get 28. And I've experimented with this pound off again. I'll do it again, and I'll get 48 seconds again. Put the pound back on, and I'll get 28. And over the years, experimented with this. It's kind of mind-blowing. Like, how in the world could a single pound make that much of a difference? But I am here to tell you, for 20 years now, it makes a difference, especially training well. If you're just throwing weights up in the air and dropping them down to the ground and your arm is for shit, then you have no way of knowing what the heck you're doing in the first place. So that matters. Think about it, not to get off the subject too much, but if you think about it, let's say you're bench pressing, let's say you're 20 years old and you're bench pressing 150 pounds and failing in a minute, right? Only add a pound to the bar the next time you train. Let's say you get 10 repetitions. You're a beginner, you're just starting. And the next time you come to the gym, you're training twice a week. So you're adding 2 pounds to the bar every week. That is a totally reasonable increase in resistance. And you're probably going to get your 8 to 10 reps each time you go. So at the end of a year now, if you're training twice a week, right, adding 2 pounds a week, what are you bench pressing at the end of 250 pounds, right? Yeah. Okay, now you're 21 years old, and you're bench pressing 250 pounds, right? That's pretty impressive. Totally doable. Okay, now if I add a mere 1 pound bar for the second year, that's another 50 pounds. So at the second year, now I'm benching 300 pounds, right? Mm-hmm. Only 22. Okay, now what are you benching at the end of 10 years? No, you're not. What are you bench pressing at the end of your... No, you're not. Nobody, normal-sized man without drugs is benching 500 pounds. Yeah. Normal-sized man, like a guy like you and me, 5'10", 170 pounds. If you are, you're on drugs or are a genetic freak of nature. So what are you supposed to do? So if you're only adding a pound to the bar after that, every time you come, you're training twice a week. What is that kid bench pressing when he's 30? No, he's not. What is he bench pressing when he's 26? No, he's not. Nobody has a 500-pound bench at 100, you know what I mean? That's not the way it works. So at some point, your strength gains have to stop. But what really happens is your ability to adapt to even a single pound where you get that same amount of repetitions that you did before might take you 10 sessions, might take you 20, but your gains are going to slow to a crawl, which means the amount of muscle that you can build after a certain point without drugs is going to halt. And so now you're at maintenance. So for me, I increase my weight loads fractionally. It almost always decreases my repetition number, and I just leave it at that weight until that repetition number, like on my pullover machine, I had raised the weight a while back. What is it? I can't remember exactly the date, but by 2 pounds, and it brought me from doing like 50 seconds to doing like 39. And I had to keep it at the same weight for I think for almost 3 months before that same weight, before I got that third repetition. That's just the way it goes. And then eventually what happens is you actually begin to get old. So I'm 54, I'm not old, but am I going to be as strong at 74 as I am now? Probably not. And why? Unless I take drugs, my hormones will decrease. You just get old. But I'll be one hell of a strong 74-year-old. And so that's basically how my training, very methodical, very consistent, very scientific, I guess you could say, and very simple. The fact of the matter is that the preponderance of evidence on the subject of training shows that simple programs work just as well as complicated periodized programs. There is absolutely no need to periodize, to complicate your training programs for any reason whatsoever to maximize your muscular development or whatever benefit you want to get from strength. Absolutely no evidence to suggest that you need to do that. And I know there are people who say that there is, but they're not looking at the evidence objectively. They're looking at it through a confirmation bias.
No, that was excellent. No, I think the listeners really enjoy some of the things you brought up today, Fred. What do you believe that other people think is insane or crazy?
Well, you mean in exercise or diet or both?
I suppose both. Either.
Well, so I'd say
just either, yeah.
From a nutritional standpoint, what is really crazy and dangerous is high carbohydrate diets. And high carbohydrate diets are kind of crazy because the amount of blood sugar that is normally in a person's bloodstream is about a teaspoon, maybe 2 teaspoons, about 5 grams, and that's it. Anytime you take in more carbohydrate than that and it converts to blood glucose and you raise your blood glucose levels, you are literally killing your pancreas. The beta cells in your pancreas are finite, okay? The more insulin you force your pancreas to produce, the sooner that organ may burn out, so to speak. And those beta cells don't grow back. So when you eat high carbohydrate diets because you think that you need carbohydrates or you mistakenly believe that carbohydrate is the primary source of fuel for the body, you are asking for it. In fact, my co-author Michael Eads at one of the primal, the symposiums. It's a primal symposium?
Is it Ancestral Symposium?
Right.
Yeah.
He postulated that he doesn't know this is for a fact, but he postulated that the pancreas may be a backup organ because in times where meat for humans wasn't plentiful and all there really was to eat was maybe tubers and fruit and things of that nature, that the pancreas was there to help with insulin in order to keep blood sugar levels normal, because obviously high levels of blood sugar are toxic, and that's why if you're a type 1 diabetic, unless you have insulin, you're dead. So, but even when you're not a diabetic, that doesn't mean that you're not messing with your system by eating a high carbohydrate diet, especially a high refined carbohydrate diet. And that's another misconception of the low carb proponents. None of the low carb proponents think that you shouldn't eat broccoli. They're talking about highly refined carbohydrates. So I would say from a nutritional standpoint, that advocating high carbohydrate diets is crazy. It's nuts. From a training standpoint, I would say the most nutty thing is CrossFit or plyometrics or anything that asks the person to produce an extremely high force effort. What's the purpose of that? Now, if the only way to build muscle and build bone density was to produce high force explosive efforts, then what are you going to do? Then you have to. There's no choice. You have to you can't play soccer slowly. You can't box slowly, right? You can't do karate slowly. So you're forced to put yourself in a dangerous situation when you engage in CrossFit, martial arts, football, boxing, and you know what the risks are, and if you're willing to take them, you take them. But in order to build bone and muscle, you do not have to do that. So it's unfortunate that the people who do CrossFit aren't more responsible when a new client walks in. I mean, to be honest with you, I am sure that there are many CrossFit people, advocates, instructors that tell people, hey, welcome. This stuff's dangerous, okay? You got to know the risks because the chances of you getting hurt are like almost 100%, okay? You willing to start? But there are many who don't. And they should be advocating very, very sound, safe strength training programs so that the typical person can become stronger, increase their bone density, increase their total mitochondria so they have more endurance, and all of the other benefits that a sound strength training, safe strength training program can bestow. So that's my answer to that one.
Very, very good answer. If you could make one request or ask for those listening in terms of, not how they find you, because we'll comment on that in a bit, but just what would you have them do to improve, I guess, the quality of their health and fitness and training? What sort of advice would you give people? Request?
Well, the first advice I would give them is to adopt a paleo type eating regimen. In other words, eat real food only. Eat meat, eat fish, eat shellfish, eat organ meat, eat vegetables, eat fruits, eat sweet potatoes, eat real food. Get away from junk manufactured food and try and learn how to prepare it yourself as best as you can. That, I think, is by far more important for someone's health than anything else you can possibly do. It almost makes exercise unimportant. Almost. I didn't say it did. Almost. And now, if you adopt an eating plan like that, that's also ideally low in sugar, you then remove aerobic exercises from your life entirely, unless that aerobic exercise is something you really, truly, honestly enjoy. Like you really just love running. Okay, fine. It gives you emotional and spiritual, whatever it is, release feelings, that's fine. But if you're slogging along on the treadmill because you think you need to make your heart healthy and to burn fat out of your fat cells, you're mistaken, and just get rid of it. Add a sound, safe strength training program, whether it's slow burn, whether it's Body by Science, or any other very slow and controlled and safe high-intensity strength training program once or twice a week. Get that into your life for exercise. Let that be the foundation for building muscle, building strength, building endurance, and all of the other goodies that strength training bestows. And, I think most people don't realize, but there's good evidence to suggest that it literally de-ages you. Strength training, weightlifting de-ages you at the genetic level and also helps with brain function. That was a recent article in the New York Times. So that's very, very compelling. So those two things are the most important things that people can do, I think. And then a third would be sleep. You got to find a way to sleep deeply and sleep soundly. I don't have the answer to that, but I think eating better, the way I suggested, makes a huge difference. I think if you get rid of your cortisol stimulating chronic cardio, that's a muscle wasting activity. I think that's another way to help deepen your sleep. And eating more fat and healthful proteins, which I already said from the paleo diet, can help as well. But that's those three things: eating well, strength training and not doing chronic cardio, and sleeping well are probably the three most important things.
That's some excellent advice there. So, in terms of the best way for people to find you, Fred, find out more about you, the products and services you provide, what sort of websites are you present? What information do you have to provide there?
So the website is slowburnpersonaltraining.com, and you can also visit, if you just go on Facebook, you can visit Serious Strength Personal Training or Serious Strength Montclair. There's two different Facebook pages. I'm not really good with social media. I'm getting better, but I have to clean up my act when it comes to that. But if you go to the website, slowburnpersonaltraining.com, which I'm fixing up as well, there's a lot of good information there. And if any of the listeners have any questions, you can email me at F as in my first name, Fred, Hahn at seriousstrength.com. Slow burn is with a system of training. Serious Strength is the name of my company. So I don't want to be confused.
Okay. I'll finish up very shortly because I appreciate your need to give your voice a break. I was just thinking about your social media strategy. If you're looking for something time efficient, probably Tim Ferriss is your man for something like that. If he's probably got some good advice for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, actually, you're absolutely right about that. He is a genius when it comes to that.
Yeah. And if you ever do speak to him soon, if you mentioned the podcast, I'd appreciate it. I'd love to have Tim on the show. But I appreciate he has a very busy podcast of his own now. So he's a very popular man. Wonderful. For all the listeners, please head over to corpwarrior.com. That's corpwarrior.com for all of the show notes for this episode. Fred, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this and enjoyed hearing your perspective, it was a mystery. I didn't know how you'd respond to some of these questions, and you've given some really insightful answers, and I really appreciate that.
Okay. I really appreciate you having me come on the show. Thanks so very much.
You're welcome, Fred. Perhaps we'll do a part 2 in the future, and I'll stay in touch.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Lawrence.
Nice one. Cheers, Fred. Bye.
Bye now.
This podcast is brought to you by hituni.com. That's hituni.com. Hit Uni is an e-learning course provider specializing in high-intensity training for personal trainers and for people looking to learn how to apply the principles of HIIT to their own training for best results. It comes highly recommended by Body by Science author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, MedX Precision Fitness owner Blair Wilson, HIIT expert Drew Bay, and the founder of Living La Vida Low Carb, Jimmy Moore. It was founded by author and high-intensity training master personal trainer Simon Shawcross. Simon has 15 years experience and has supervised over 15,000 workouts. Due to a combination of demand and a lack of quality in certification programs in the fields of high-intensity training, Simon and his team spent the last 3 years developing top-quality courses that will educate fitness professionals and participants to enable them to train individuals and themselves in the safest manner and produce best results. HIIT Uni has been put together using knowledge from the very best minds in the field of exercise, including Skylar Tanner, James Steele, Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, John Little, Mike Mensa, Arthur Jones, Dr. Ellington Darden, and many more. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace and convenience. The online video presentations are engaging and make learning fun. Online support and a discussion forum are provided to resolve any sticking points and enable you to share ideas and ask for help. Depending on whether you want to become a personal trainer, are already a personal trainer who wants to upskill, or if you're a keen HIIT participant that is eager to learn more about how you can apply HIIT to your own workouts for maximum benefit, there are several great value courses to choose from. I am personally partway through the PT course and I'm really enjoying it. I primarily wanted to do the course to learn more about how to apply HIIT to my own training for better results. The courses are really easy to follow and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's hituni.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, hituni.com, pick your course and enter the coupon code CW10. Thanks very much for your support.